back on the 18th of May, I wrote an economic strategy called Watch the RBA Copy the Fed. And at the bottom of the first page of that, I heroically said, we now forecast that at the next meeting of the RBA will lift the Australian cash rate to 85 basis points in line with the new level of the effective Fed funds rate. Now, it appears that out of 27 economists surveyed, only 2 economists correctly forecast that the RBA would put up rates by 50 basis points to 85 basis points. So I've got to find out who the other economist is, and I feel I owe them a drink. But going through the logic of what I said last time, and I don't think, honestly, I don't wish to change anything in the previous piece because I think I captured a lot of what was happening. That the RBA has been, in fact, following the effective Fed funds rate since March 2020. And we did that when we went down to 10 basis points from 25. And that brought us in line with the effective Fed funds rate, which at that time was 8 basis points. And the reason I thought that we had got in line with that, if you're doing a huge amount of importing of capital from the US wholesale market, as our banks do now, though they didn't have to because of the term lending facility, which was in place up until the end of last year, but they now are operating fully to supplement the deposits they get from their own domestic depositors by access to the US wholesale market. You make that access to that international liquidity much more efficient if you're moving your rates in line with where the US is moving their rates, because it means you don't have the same problems in terms of foreign currency hedging when you're trading Australian dollar loans in the US. So, and you can do it much more efficiently. So what I said at that time was that I thought that the Fed, which is meeting again next week, would increase rates by another 50 basis points next week, and that we would match that in August by going another 50 basis points to an Australian cash rate of 135 basis points, and that's exactly what I think is going to happen. And the reason I think it's going to happen that way is because after the last meeting, both in his statement after the last Fed meeting and in the Fed minutes, Jay Powell, the chair of the Fed, said that they'd have he thought that they'd have 50 basis point rate hikes and then review it. So it's 2 and then review, okay? And that takes us as far as the July meeting, and it takes us as far as the August meeting of the RBA. But I also said in this piece that I quoted commentary from Mary Daly, who is president of the San Francisco Fed, that the Open Market Committee of the Fed thought that normal interest rates or neutral interest rates was at a Fed funds rate of 250 basis points, and that what she thought is that they would get to 250 as fast as possible, and that continues to be my view. And as that happens, we will follow the Fed up. I think it's interesting looking at the statement that Mr. Philip Lowe, PhD, provided after the meeting this week, and I think it's the last paragraph which struck me as interesting, where he says that the increase, and I quote, is a further step in the withdrawal of the extraordinary monetary support that was put in place to help the Australian economy during the pandemic. One of the privileges of doing a presentation or hosting a presentation for the RBA on an annual basis, as I've been doing for the last 10 years, I guess, for the Economic Society, is you actually have to consult with them beforehand and you get a sense of their schedule, particularly over the last 2 years where we've been doing a national webinar, one by Guy Bell and last year with Philip Lowe, is that you get a sense of their schedule because you have to do rehearsals for this national webinar, and therefore you have to move around to accommodate particularly the schedule of the governor. And in doing that, I got a sense of the very considerable amount of consultation that the RBA does with the Fed in terms of having meetings with the Fed. And so I can see that just as there was a high degree of policy coordination back in 2020 of generating the stimulus, both provided by both the Fed and the RBA, and getting them to move together so you could have international synchronized movement, I think that is again happening. And so I think that there's a high level of consultation between the Federal Reserve and the RBA about what they call and what Philip Lowe at the very end of that last paragraph of the statement talks about as the normalisation of interest rates. And so what we've said is that the Fed intends to normalise interest rates at 250 basis points by the end of this year, and that means an effective funds rate of 258 basis points. And that means that the RBA will move to a cash rate of 260 basis points to normalise that international stimulus in line with the Federal Reserve. So everything that I wrote on the 18th of May in that piece is still as valid as when I wrote it. Fortunately, the first forecast in that, which was of a 50 basis point rate hike this week, happened exactly as I suggested it would, and I think that the rest of the normalisation of Australian rates in line with the normalisation of Fed rates will continue between now and the end of this year.